I got a better chance of getting somebody to agree about me having a podcast about loving my mother versus me trying to convince you that Nas is the greatest rapper who ever did it. One thing you got to remember about music is art. Music is a fantasy world. Conversation is real life. Conversation is something that happens without electricity, without instruments, without machines, without anything needed. You can have a conversation with somebody. Arguably, conversation is the first art form that was probably ever created. Yo, what up? Welcome back to the Halfway Up podcast. And I call it Halfway Up because you will never finish rising. And today, I got a real special episode, a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. And that topic is podcasting versus music. And not really versus like they're going against each other, but more so like a deep analysis, a comparison that I've never heard anybody actually do. Now, for a little background, I'm in the podcast industry now. I work at WTF Media Studios. My bosses, Alex and Wheezy. Shout out to Mandy. These are the people that employ me. These are the people that give me a job and have blessed me with an opportunity to sit in front of podcasters all day long, Monday through Monday, and record sessions. And during those sessions, I learn things. I hear things behind the scenes. I hear things before episodes start, after episode starts. I get to meet people like Charlamagne the God. I get to see people like Earn Your Leisure. I met Scarlett Johansson. I've even had a chance to meet some very popular recording artists like BJ the Chicago Kid, Vic Mensa, Smino, Luke from Dreamville, you name it. I've had an opportunity to meet and rub shoulders with a lot of people that are doing things in their field, no matter what kind of field it is, from all type of spaces, technology, beauty, hip hop, gossip, housewives. I've met them all. There are many people of different walks of life that I've been afforded the luxury of meeting through podcasting. And a little bit more about my background. I'm an engineer here at WTF Media Studios located in New York City on Canal Street. I am honored and privileged to work at a Black-owned podcast studio, 100% Black-owned. My bosses, Alex and Wheezy, have blessed me with the opportunity to work this incredible job and therefore be able to witness and be a part of an incredible lifestyle and breaking history. Because WTF Media, I don't think it's no secret, is the biggest podcast studio in the world, and it will undoubtedly go down in the history books for allowing very expensive quality to be accessible by people who otherwise don't have the accessibility or the knowledge to recreate the situation themselves. And I'm so honored and appreciative to be a part of something so special like that. So that's where my podcast background comes from. Music, I'm gonna keep this short, but for those of you that don't know, before I came to New York City 4 years ago, I lived in Dallas, Texas. I was a part and contributed to a very incredible hip hop local community scene. And listen, I think this is the best hip hop scene in the country. The best underground local hip hop scene in the country by far, I think, belongs to Dallas, Texas. And if you disagree, let me know. Send me some artists from whatever city you from, because we could talk about it. If not even that I've traveled so many places, it's just that I have yet to see an internet presence or local presence that matches the one where I come from. And when I lived in Dallas, before I ever knew that I would come to New York City and be a part of podcasting, I was a hip hop recording artist myself. And I've done every single job that orbits the planet of an artist. I've been a graphic designer, a photographer, a videographer. I've made beats. I've rapped on stages. I've rapped in front of ciphers, in front of my peers and my friends. I've absolutely done it all. After being in this space for quite some time, I finally decided it was time for me to pivot my efforts from being a recording artist to now becoming a podcaster. And I want to talk about this because specifically for African American people, it's no secret that a lot of the areas where we put our energy and our intentions are sports and music. It's all entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to tell you that trying to become a rapper is a bad thing or to look down upon it because I dropped out of school. No, not even dropped out. I flunked out of school so that I could pursue being a rapper. And I worked at jobs like Walmart and I worked at jobs like Jamba Juice and Once Upon a Child and all these different places. Whatever I could do to make sure I could get money to pay for computer equipment, to pay for new lenses, to pay for new microphones, to pay for new clothes so I could look good in front of my music videos, so I could look like a rapper. I did all of those things and I don't regret it because it brought me here. So if you want to become a recording artist or you want to go to the NBA, by all means, do your thing because I'm a firm believer that Even if your plan doesn't work, that doesn't matter as long as you have a plan. Like I told y'all before, my plan was to come to New York City and to record music and do music videos. That did not happen. But what did happen was so much better. And who's to say I would have came to this perfect ideal scenario for my life if I didn't chase that first dream or follow that first plan first? So I want to talk about this because I want to show people that there is another way. And I know that if you don't have the luxury to live somewhere in California or live somewhere on the East Coast, that probably means you live somewhere in the middle of America. And we all know that in the middle of America, they're not as influenced by the media. They're not as influenced by the type of jobs that exist in the creative space. Because when I lived in Texas, I had no idea that you could make money like this. Now, granted, at one point in time, you probably couldn't because podcasting is fairly new, but even to that point, jobs that exist in places like the coast, New York and LA, they don't exist in Idaho. They don't exist in Wisconsin. They barely exist in Texas. But you know what? I believe that one day that's going to change. And that can easily change if more people focus on podcasting. I believe podcasting is something that could bring I believe that podcasting could be the answer to a lot of people's wishes. A lot of people who are living somewhere in Tennessee and they have dreams to be living a creative lifestyle, but they don't necessarily want to move to New York City or they don't want to move to California. They don't want to be one of those people who leave home. They want to get it out the mud where they from. You could probably do that if you focus on podcasting because with podcasting, you could do it anywhere. As long as you're making somebody feel something, as long as you can evoke an emotion and resonate with your message and resonate your message with another person, you could do that anywhere in the globe. I'm doing this podcast because I want to open people's minds to the different opportunities you might not have thought about yet. Just like I hadn't thought about it. But little did I know God would be ordering my footsteps and walking me right into an industry that would not only change my life, but make me so happy and so fulfilled and give me purpose. Because truth be told, being a musician was very hard for me. There's nothing that I love more than doing that, but it was hard for me. And at the end of the day, my purpose in life is to take care of myself and take care of my parents. That's what I want for myself, financial stability. That is my number one focus in life. And I had to be real with myself and admit that I probably wasn't going to make that happen in music. It doesn't mean I have to stop doing music. It doesn't mean that I have to never make another hip hop song ever again. I just want people to be aware of all of the options because that's the difference between people who maximize everything in life and the people who don't. The difference from the people who are rich and affluent and the people who are poor and broken. The people who are poor and broken, they don't understand their options, so they can't even exercise them. The people at the bottom can't exercise everything they could do because they've already been told what they can't do. And all they really know is what they can't. And some people think that the only way that I'm going to be able to really shine and really live my life is to become what I see on the music videos when I see the other black boys with dreadlocks who look just like me. So let's talk about music real quick. There are a couple of things that are very difficult for a recording artist to do that I've seen podcasters do many, many times, time and time and time and time again. I've seen podcasters who work regular 9 to 5 jobs get into a room with another podcaster, or maybe not even a podcaster, just a person of some level of immense success. I'm talking about people who are very successful, CEOs, professional athletes, professional rappers, experts in their areas like tech, finances, real estate, therapy, science. Some of the greatest authors of the greatest books. I have seen time and time again regular civilian people like myself. And when I say regular civilian people, what I mean is people who do not have the typical leverage to get somebody to get into a room with them. Because usually when you get next to somebody who's of importance or you get next to somebody who's famous, you kind of have to have some level of fame yourself for it to make sense for that person to take some time out of their busy day to come and sit with you. In podcasting, time and time and time again, I have seen regular people with no leverage get next to very famous people. And every single time it happened, I just couldn't believe it. People who own companies, people who have thousands of fans, people who are masters of medicine and law. I'm talking about the best of the best in their dedicated field. And it started to happen so much, I realized that this wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a blue moon that I would see somebody of the likes of Ian Dunlap or 19 Keys. They would come into these studios and sit across from people who trying to get into the spots that they in. And every time that would happen, I would just be so confused because from the music world that I traditionally come from, these type of things would never happen. In order for a musician to get next to one of their favorite artists, three things have to happen. And every single one of these things that I'm going to list are extremely difficult. There's a very small window of opportunity for any artist to get through, even if you're nice, even if you're extremely talented. Being talented helps, but all in all, when it comes to music, it has so little to do with how good you actually are and so much more to do with who you know and what it is you know. It's more about the things that lift the music to where it needs to be versus the music itself. For a musician to get next to their favorite artist, you have to either have a song that is performing so well that it makes sense for them to want to get on the song with you because the song is hot. Then it makes sense for a person like Drake to come and find you, ask you to be on your song, do a remix, do a music video, and next thing you know, y'all are sharing each other's fan bases. So y'all collaborate together and y'all work together to build each other up. And obviously, this is something that we've seen Drake do time and time and time again, just like Jay-Z, working with Pimp C, working with the guys in Philly. Time and time again, we have seen artists come down from the top to build with the guys at the bottom and make magic to conduct business. But the chances of creating a song that would do so well that it would garner the attention of the people at the top is very slim. It's very slim. Number two, you have to know somebody who knows somebody. And even though they say everybody is just a 6 degree of separation away from each other, it is very difficult to find yourself getting into the inner circles of an artist that you would love to be in the presence of. It's very difficult. Ask any musician that you know. Even when you feel like you're getting close, sometimes you're still so far away. It's very difficult. And three, if you don't have a hot song that is doing so well by itself that it makes sense for an artist to lend you some of their time, if you don't know somebody who knows somebody to put you in the inner circle to get you a studio session with that artist, then the only other option that you have is to pay for a feature. But on average, nobody really has feature money. Like, I don't know if you know, but rappers be charging like $10,000 for a feature for one verse. And $10,000 is on the low end. Somewhere on the higher version of business in hip hop culture, people are spending $50,000 and up just to get on a song with somebody because they know that getting a song from a certain kind of artist could change your life. It could literally be the difference between you just doing shows in a couple of cities to now you're touring around the world, selling out, selling merchandise, gaining fans, and becoming a bigger artist, raising your profile. All three of these things that I've stated are scenarios that any artist would love, but they almost never happen because the chances is almost like hitting the lottery. You might as well go to the corner store and get you a scratch off because it's difficult. The windows of opportunity for this to happen is very slim to none. And I do not say this to intimidate or discourage somebody from chasing a dream and still trying anyway, because I believe absolutely anything is possible. But I only bring these things up because all three of these things that are very difficult to happen inside of music, I have seen happen in the world of podcasting. For example, my boss, Weezy, who's part owner of WTF Media Studios. She is by every definition successful, famous, accomplished, very well off financially. She is living the life that every single rapper would die to live. Time and time again, I have seen her lend her presence to podcasts that barely average 1,000 views on YouTube. Or you can look at another podcast called Conversations with Zoe, another guy who is not famous, who doesn't have the type of leverage to get big star celebrity people to come and sit on his show. And yet, I've seen him sit down with 19 Keys. I've seen him sit down with Ian Dunlap. I've seen him sit down with Cassidy. I've seen him sit down with so many people time and time again. And every single time it happened, I asked myself, how is this possible? Because from the music world, the music traditional way of thinking, this shouldn't be possible because you're not lit enough. You're not famous. You don't have a product that's going so viral and so crazy in the world that it makes sense for them to pay attention to you. Of course, he's working hard. Of course, he's being consistent, but that's all he was being. There are plenty of artists and musicians who are dropping great projects, going very hard, being very consistent, and it's still so difficult for them to get in a room just to have a conversation with one of their favorite artists. We're not even talking about making a song with your favorite artist. You know how hard it is just to get in a room with some of your favorite artists? And yet in podcasts, I see it happen again and again and again. There's a production company that records here all the time called Dear Media. I seen them do a show with Scarlett Johansson. These people aren't famous. They own a business. But when have you ever heard people who just own a business be able to get somebody who's at the top of the celebrity food chain? The point that I'm trying to make is that podcasting can be very, very generous, and they don't know because they are not privileged to be in the position that I am to see these things. I get the opportunity to learn and observe podcasters. I get to hear what they say when the cameras are not rolling. I get to hear what they say when the cameras are rolling. I get to hear the conversations. I get to hear the game and the information. And time again, I'm just more and more convinced that podcasting is a more generous medium. I'm starting to believe that podcasting has the potential to bring more people together than music does. And let me explain what I mean by that, because I know that sounds crazy. I'm starting to think that podcasting might bring people together faster than music does. You got to think about music taste. Music taste, obviously subjective, right? You got people who think Nas is the greatest rapper ever. You got people who think Jay-Z is the greatest rapper. You got people who think Kendrick is the greatest rapper ever. You got people who think Drake is the greatest rapper. You got people who think Gucci, Lil Wayne, Boosie, Webby, Future. Everybody has a different idea of what the greatest rapper is. And because of that, music will always be subjective. And so is podcasting. But music is more so like having a favorite color. If I like red, I just like red. And if you like blue, you just like blue. There's no way for me to actually convince you that the color red is better than blue because you love blue. And that's how you feel. And that's what's true to you. That's kind of what music is. Music is so instinctive to who you are, how you hear things, how you perceive things, the way you've grown up culturally. I mean, at least as far as hip hop goes, there's always going to be this divide of people who want to defend what they believe in because they believe to defend their music is defending themselves. But the problem with it is you'll never really be able to prove it because it's not based on anything factual. And that's okay. That's why we have these timeless arguments about who's the greatest rapper, who's your top 5, who's your top 20, who had the better verse on what song, who really got the best of who. Was it Eminem or was it Jay-Z on Renegade? Like, we'll always have these conversations, even right now with Drake and J. Cole. People are saying that Drake forfeited an opportunity to bar up with J. Cole. In music, we're always going to have conversations like that because it's so hard to please everybody. People are coming into music looking for different things. They want to hear different things. They have different expectations of what being a good rapper is. What is a good verse? What is a good verse? What is a good punchline? What is a good metaphor? What is a good beat? Being a musician, it is so difficult to serve and make everybody happy. It's absolutely impossible. And you should never try to. You should never try to make everybody happy if you're a musician, because first and foremost, you got to make yourself happy. Once you're happy, then you can start having ideas of sharing it with the world and see who likes it. And you're not even in control of who likes it. I'm sure a lot of artists release a song, the song goes big, it goes platinum, and now it's time to go on tour, and they finally get a chance to work the song and see the people that it resonated with. And I'm sure a lot of artists were surprised to see who was in the front, who was in the middle, who was buying the merch, who was coming to the meet and greet, who paid for VIP. I'm sure a lot of artists were surprised because you do not get the chance to control who likes your music. And with all of that being said, I raise an argument that it might be a lot easier to get two people to agree on the topic of a conversation than it is to agree on how much we like the same song. When I was growing up, I thought that J. Cole, Drake, Kendrick, Nas, I thought that these were the greatest rappers to ever do it. People like Currency, people like Common, people like Joey Badass, Mick Jenkins. You know, these are people that I think are like lyrical geniuses. And when I think about hip hop, I think to myself that this is the pinnacle of hip hop. It cannot be done at a higher level than this, at least at this moment in my life. But it never really mattered about how passionate I was about Tribe Called Quest, Lupe Fiasco, Common, Kanye West, Drake, Kendrick, Nas. It never really mattered because somewhere not too far away, somebody felt the same way about Boosie, about Future, about Gucci Mane. And that's not to say that when it comes to podcasting, people don't disagree on that either, because of course they do. Working at a podcast studio, one of the number one things people spend money to use this time for is to argue, to have a difference of opinion, to have debate, to go back and forth. So yeah, podcasting just don't make everybody kumbaya, but at the same time, I got a better chance of getting somebody to agree about me having a podcast about loving my mother versus me trying to convince you that Nas is the greatest rapper who ever did it. It's just a different thing. And the reason I think that is because conversation hits way closer to something we can relate to than what sets us apart. I might have a conversation about how bitches ain't shit, or how we should treat women with respect, or how much I love my mother, or how much I love my friends, or how lonely I am, how depressed I am, how nervous I am, how happy I am, how you got to go out there and take risk in life. There's so many people that I could get to agree with my message because it just sounds like something that we do every single day. One thing you got to remember about music is art. Music is a fantasy world. Conversation is real life. Conversation is something that happens without electricity, without instruments, without machines, without anything needed. You can have a conversation with somebody. Arguably, conversation is the first art form that was probably ever created. Since I've been doing a podcast, one of the most interesting things to me that I've seen so far is I've had people that are way younger than me like my content, and then I've had people who's old enough to be my grandparent like my content. And that in itself is really shocking to me. Because when you think about that happening in music, for you to get two generations that are on the complete polar opposite of history to agree on something, you either got to be Michael Jackson, Drake, Beyonce, or Taylor Swift. Like, I'm talking Bob Marley, Luther Vandross, Marvin Gaye. There are very few artists that have been able to bridge the gap between the youngest of the young and the oldest of the old. It's a very difficult thing to do because a lot of the time concerning hip hop, it's about what's happening now, what sounds are current now. When I came to New York City, I never heard of drill music. I thought drill music was something that existed in Chicago. And to my surprise, I get here and realize Fivio Foreign and rest in peace, Pop Smoke, they got this new sound that they pioneering. And before I knew it, all of New York City would adopt this sound. Drill music is the chapter of musical history that we are in as far as New York City is concerned. So music is always changing. The metric of what we think is cool, the metric of what we consider to be good is never staying the same. It's constantly evolving. And that's a great thing. And that's a great thing because the culture stays fresh. It stays innovative. But all I'm really trying to say is you got a way greater chance to connect with your grandfather by telling him how your day was than you would trying to convince him of how dope this drill rapper is. And as soon as he pressed play, this nigga done killed 100 people on one block. He ain't even left his borough yet. And I got another theory that I've been hypothesizing on. I think that it's easier to podcast than it is to create music. Because with music, you can't just free flow your way through music. Some of the best people can. I already hear the pushback that some of y'all is thinking to yourselves and probably saying as you're listening to this podcast. But you get what I mean, especially if you are a recording artist. Don't be an asshole. You know what I mean. When you are doing music, there are laws of physics that have to be abided by and that have to be happening at all times for it to actually be good. If you want to consider the music something that can be listened to, there are certain things that have to be happening at all times. There's a rule system to music. There's a rule system. You can't just do anything you want and then say it's the greatest thing you ever heard. Nah, like if you want music to be music, then it has to be rhythmic. It has to have melody. It has to have BPMs. It has to have several different things that are very different, but all working to be the same thing. Different things working together to create a new result. Different things that are all working together to create one same feeling. And it doesn't even matter what kind of music you make, whether it's rock and roll, country, techno, or hip hop music. Whatever you're writing down lyric-wise, it has to rhyme. It has to fit inside of the melody of the production, whether that's you being on a guitar, whether that's you putting your fingers to the keys of a piano, or you just rapping to a beat machine or something that you made in FL Studio. It has to complement the production. If it doesn't complement the production, then you don't have music. That's just first things first. Does your tone of voice match with the beat? What kind of songwriter are you? Are you a straight to the point, say it how you mean kind of artist? Are you the type of person who speaks in metaphors and a person who speaks with imagery? What type of person are you? Either way, it has to work. You can't just throw paint on the wall and then stand back and decide this is art. You have to abide by the rules. There are physics and gravity and things that you have to abide by. There are elements of nature in music, just like the real world, that you have to abide by. You can't avoid it. I can't just decide gravity don't exist because I want to fly. I have to adhere to the rules that exist here on Earth. And the exact same thing works in music. You can't just do anything. There's a series of things that are very different, but when it comes together, the result is, I love this song. The result is, I love the way this makes me feel. Well, in podcasting, it's a lot more simpler than that. I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm not going to say podcasting is easy. It's definitely a lot easier than it is taking on the role of making good music. But it's simple enough to the point that absolutely anybody can do it. Not anybody could do music. Now, there are people who are bad at music. You might not like the song, but trust and believe there are people who can't even do what a bad artist does. There are people who can't just put on a beat and think of something to say. They might get analysis paralysis. They might never even come up with one bar because they just thinking way too deep. And because there are rules in music and those things have to always make sense in some kind of way, that is why artists like Kendrick Lamar takes 2 or 3 years to perfect the album. That is why whenever a leak happens from an artist and you hear it and it sounds undone or it sounds unfinished, that's because that leak was never meant to be shared to the public because it's not ready. It doesn't meet the standards of a professional artist. But you know what really makes a professional artist professional? They don't release anything until they know that it's up to the standards of the world. Now, of course, you got artists like Drake and Cole and Future who don't need to take as long to perfect their craft to get to the point where they can share it with the world. But my point stands that because music has to be done a certain kind of way, more oftentimes than not, it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to take a lot longer to incubate it, to curate it, to get it right. There's a mixing and mastering process. Mixing and mastering alone could take you 365 days to really get it to a point where you've decided it's worthy to be out. We all hear stories about Kanye West being a perfectionist to get his drums like Jay Dilla's. We all hear stories about the reason why the Detox never really came out because Dr. Dre actually made it 100 times over, but he never was satisfied that it was perfect enough. There are examples of people who are legendary, people who are literally iconic in our eyes, super pivotal to our culture. They don't even want to put music out because if it's not right, that means it's not right. In podcasting, it is so much easier to create you a nice aesthetic, a nice background, like here at WTF Media Studios. Put your microphone on, put these lights on, get you some cameras, and then you just go for it. There's a great chance you could resonate with somebody. If anything, I'm really trying to make a case that more musicians should consider having a podcast because you got a better chance of getting 1 million people to see your face over a piece of content than you do making a song. Listen, I have recorded way too many songs to count, and I can promise you, as good as any of those songs might have been, they never reached 1 million people like my content did for my podcast. I did one episode. I made one reel, and that reel was about telling women to lower their expectations for a guy that's actually not their boyfriend, and that shit went dumb viral. Yo, podcasting is such a generous art form. It even caters to all the social media formats that we use today. My podcast hadn't even been out for 6 months, and I already made 1 million impressions. I've had 1 million people like my posts, share my reels, leave comments. And as of recently, people have been remixing my content. They reposting my shit on their page, and it's going viral again. And of course, people go viral for music all the time. You already know that. But my point is, it's so much harder. Now, I don't know how I can get the data and the statistics for this, but I'm pretty sure there are more people going viral over podcast reels than there are people going viral over a song that they made. I'm just sure. Because so many things have to be working all at once for music to actually be good, that slows down the output process. The chances of you flooding the market with music is so much slimmer than it is to you flooding the market with podcasting, because with podcasting, you don't have to be musically talented. There are way more people in this life that have the power of saying something interesting or making you laugh or making you feel better or just saying something that moves you because it resonates with you. There are more people on earth like that than there are people who know how to rhyme, or there are people who know how to carry a beat, people who know how to sing. There are so few great musicians on planet Earth than there are people who could be great conversationalists. And that's part of the reason why I think podcasting is doing so good, because people relate to it more. They can see themselves in it more. I can have a conversation talking about growing up in my city and all the things that I love to do. And that would resonate with people more than it would if I made a song about it, because maybe they wouldn't like the beat. Maybe they don't like my tone of voice. Maybe they don't like my lyrics. Maybe they don't understand the cadence. But you know what they do understand? My tone of speech when I'm just having a conversation with somebody. That's a lot easier for them to digest. Again, I don't say this to discourage anybody. A lot of my friends are artists. A lot of my friends are musicians personally. Y'all keep doing y'all thing. I believe in all of y'all. But I'm just saying, these are things that I have learned going to the other side of the pond. Everything ain't for everybody. You know, I tried doing music full time and I realized, you know what, I got better strength somewhere else. I always been somebody who loved having conversations. I always been somebody who was stimulated and intrigued and energized off of just building with a person or building with a group of people. That's always been a different bag that I had. You know, as human beings, we're not a monolith. We can do a gamut of things. One of the things that I did was making music, but as of recently, one of the things that I do is I podcast and I have conversations for a living. But I'm starting to understand how to properly evaluate a conversation, because now that we have podcasting, you can do that. You could have $1 million voice now. Once upon a time, you couldn't have $1 million voice. You had to be a radio personality or you had to be a co-host off of BET or some shit like that. But now we can have your own platform. You don't got to worry about getting hired by nobody. You can hire yourself. You can put yourself on. You have a way greater chance of traveling the world, selling out live shows, selling out merchandise, and connecting with people doing a podcast than you ever would music, because music is just harder. Another theory that I would like to hypothesize about is the business models. The business models, the difference between the business model of music and the business model of podcasting. Everybody knows, how many more movies do we need to see? How many more books do we need to read? How many more YouTube interviews do we need to see and hear about to realize that the music industry is shady? That shit is shady. It's like, man, that is not the place where people of integrity and honor do business. So many people who don't even own their music, but they made millions for a record label. Millions. We talking about records that we know and that we love. Shit that we can't imagine being at a barbecue with we can't imagine being at a barbecue without hearing these songs played. Some of them people died broke. Some of them people never got their just due. And of course, it was a different time. They didn't know what they was getting into. They needed a way out, so they signed a contract. A lot of people still do it today, but a lot of people today are a lot smarter. But even now, there's 360 deals. There's all these things that help another person who didn't think the things that you thought when you was in that room with you and your producer, that allows them to put their hands in your cookie jar, that allows them to put their hands in your finances. And the crazy part is they getting more of the bread than you. If Michael Jackson was a millionaire and he didn't own his music, how much you think the record labels got? How much you think the record labels got? If Michael Jackson was this millionaire, right, got more number ones than anybody on planet Earth, the biggest superstar of all superstars, everybody know Michael Jackson was rich. Everybody know Michael Jackson had that bag, man. He's him. It's a very small group of artists that could even be mentioned in the category of Michael Jackson. But as rich as Michael Jackson was, do you know that there was a white man who was richer than him? Who was richer than Michael, because for every dollar Michael made, he got 3 off of that same principle? Obviously, the business model of music doesn't have to be shady. It doesn't have to be dirty. It doesn't have to be convoluted. It can be clear, and people can get rich, and people have gotten rich, and we've been able to see that as well. We've seen people be great independent successes. We've seen all type of great stories. But my point is that because music takes a lot more, a lot harder to actually get to a point where it's worthy to call yourself professional, you'll find that the business model of music is a lot more strenuous. In comparison to podcasting, it's very simple. You go into a studio, you record long form content, you grab you a microphone, and then you bust that long form content down into short form content, otherwise known as reels. And then you use those reels to be little hand grenades, little bombs that you just drop, little sticks of dynamite that hopefully take off and resonate. Maybe this one does 10,000, maybe this one does 2,000, then maybe one does 100,000, maybe another one does 1,000,000. But either way, you get to easily multiply yourself for every episode you drop. I mean, I do at least 5 clips for every episode that I do. 5 opportunities that I get to share my likeness with the world and get an opportunity to connect with somebody. And you know what? If it doesn't connect with nobody in this one episode, I get to do another one. I could do a new episode every single day, several times a day. And I know artists can do the same thing. But what I'm saying is that on average, it's way harder for an artist to make something to his liking to the point where he's confident to release it to the world. It's just harder. Now, shout out to Charlemagne. These days, they got podcast networks. And to be honest, I don't really know what a podcast network does. I kind of have a loose idea. I think from my understanding that they get you ads and they help you get brand deals that might be a lot easier to do versus just doing it by yourself because they already got the companies in their back pocket. But on average, you don't even need a podcast network. All you need is a microphone and to get connected to the Wi-Fi, and you here. People can hear you. People can feel you. People can share your message with people that you won't even know. You can share your message with people you'll never meet. You can get into every 6 degree of separation if your content resonates with the right person. Because you might have said something that aids to the confirmation bias that a person might have for themselves or how they see the world. For better or for worse, it doesn't really matter. The point that I'm trying to get to is that with podcasting, the business model is so simple. Long form content, short form content, you done. You repeat and you repeat and you repeat until you continue to grow an audience, and then you create leverage. Now you're talking live shows. Now you're talking Patreon. Now you're talking merchandise. Now you're talking brand deals. It is not to say that you can't do these things with music either, because you can. You totally can. But it's so much more difficult. And I can't even tell you why. I don't have all the answers. But what I can tell you is that these niggas in podcasting is getting this money and they a lot happier. A lot of artists are stressed. They stress because they're looking out at their peers and other people who they think that they better than. And to them, it doesn't make sense why they're not in the same spot. It don't make sense to them. Podcasters, they be feeling that way, but they don't really be feeling that way because they too busy because they too busy eating everything they kill. Way more often than not, you will get to see a podcaster get the opportunity to eat what they kill. Versus a musician, you got to kill again, and then maybe you get a chance to eat. Being a musician, it's a tough road, man. It's not for anybody. It's only for the people who really have a heart for it. The people who stick with it deserve it, because they eventually see that they get exactly what it is that they want. But most people don't have that within them. You could even take myself, for example. I had to pivot. I realized that I could not continue to invest my energy and my time into this. But as soon as I pivoted over to podcasting, boom, 1 million impressions. Boom, 100,000 reshares. Boom, 500,000 reshares. 30,000 comments. 60,000 likes. Clearly, I'm getting more value on this side. And when I think about why is it that I did music in the first place, it was to connect with people. Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm connecting with people. And, honestly, the business model of podcasting probably owes all of its credit to music, because the podcast hustle is really just the music hustle, just done in a lot much easier way. You can have live shows. You can sell merchandise. You can have brand deals. I've been in this studio and have heard people say they've gotten $35,000 just for making 8 pieces of content for a brand. $35,000, that's a living yearly salary, bro. You know what you got to do to make $35K for an artist? It's so many steps that have to be taking place for you to even get to a place where you can get opportunities to make that kind of money. Back in the day, niggas was doing club walkthroughs. You gotta fucking be a host. There's so much you gotta do. It's so much harder for an artist to get a brand deal with a big company, because a lot of the time, the lifestyle of a rapper is too risky for a brand to get next to. They can't compromise the integrity of their brand or take the risk of people looking at them funny because a nigga pulling up lean, or because a nigga killing niggas in his song, or whatever the type of lifestyle is. If it doesn't fit, a lot of the brand deals will never happen. But so many brand deals happen with podcasters because podcasters look more so like the everyday person. And if you become a famous podcaster, that's even better, because a company doesn't have to worry about you having this gangster image or this violent lifestyle that they might accidentally portray to their audience. They don't have to worry about that with a podcaster. So in a lot of ways, a podcaster has a cleaner image, and that cleaner image allows a podcaster to get more brand deals, to have more conversations with companies, more meetings with CEOs. And then we got Patreon. Let's not forget Patreon. Now, again, yes, musicians can have Patreon too. They absolutely can. But on average, I don't really see a lot of musicians taking advantage of the paywall like I do podcasters. So, for example, I work very closely with a podcast called Horrible Decisions. Horrible Decisions has been hiring me for years to shoot vlogs for them. They would hire me to come into their homes, follow them around the city, travel with them, just to capture their life, just to capture the things that can't be captured when you're not necessarily doing a podcast at the moment. When they're not doing a podcast at the moment, but they need something more official than just camera footage. When they need something more than just social media clips to show what they've been up to when they're not sitting in front of a set to record a podcast. They would hire me for that. But what you think they was doing with those vlogs? They was putting them on Patreon. And when they put them on Patreon, the dope thing about Patreon is like you can do it however you want it. You can have different tiers. So you can have a $5 tier, a $10 tier, a $20 tier, a $50 tier. Let's say, and I don't actually know this because I've never paid for Horrible Decisions Patreon, but let's say the vlogs only exist on the $20 tier. You know how many people are gonna pay that $20 so that they can see their favorite podcasters, their favorite people that they look up to see what type of life they live? Because people so nosy, they want to see what type of homes you be in. They want to see what kind of car you drive. They want to hear about the things that you might talk about when you're not on camera, when you're not on set. They want to hear the phone calls you having with CEOs. They want to see you striking up $100,000 deals with companies so they can see how it's done. There are certain things that only exist on Patreon, and you get a chance to see that because people like Horrible Decisions, podcasters like Horrible Decisions are smart enough to hire a cinematographer like me, pay me some money, but then on the back end, they make so much more money than what they paid me. Not only do they recoup what they gave me, but they make so much more. Those are the kind of opportunities that all podcasters eat from. So again, not to stay on this for too long, but even the business model of podcasting, I think, is a lot more generous than music. It's a lot more generous. Maybe saying it's better is not the right word, but I do think that more people could benefit from the business model of podcasting than they ever could from the business model of music, because there's too many fuck niggas in music. It's too many sharks and people who prey on good people and want to take advantage of them. And it's not to say those people don't exist in podcasting, because any industry you're going to find evil. Any industry you're going to find shady and just fucked up people who want to take advantage of a good opportunity. That's just, you got to have street smarts. You got to know that. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the lifestyle. And I know a lot of musicians will hopefully feel this. Whenever you're promoting music, a lot of the time when you're trying to get somebody to listen to your shit, they don't want to do it. And they don't want to do it because it feels like they're doing a chore to listen to your music. Because once again, people like music that they instantly connect with. They don't want to be a part of something that they have to figure out. And they definitely don't want to feel like they're burdened to help somebody on the come up. People don't want to feel burdened by having to listen to your music. You know, they don't want to be getting a message from you and opening up their DMs to see you sending them another song. Because if they wanted to fuck with your music, they would just fuck with your music. A lot of the time when artists are sharing music, it feels like you're giving me something to do. It's like, nigga, my life is already hard enough. I already got so many things that I'm trying to take care of. You trying to give me an extra thing to do? It's a turnoff to people almost always immediately. Versus podcast reels, people feel naturally inclined to share. That's why I was able to get 1 million impressions. That's why I'm able to drop a reel that gets 500,000 views without being a famous person, without being a person with the leverage, without being a person with the clout, without being a person with the famous connections. I'm able to do that because the podcast reel moves as the voice of the person that agrees with it. So when they reshare it or they repost it or they leave a comment, it's because they agree with it. Like, really think about this. If I drop a reel and I'm speaking on something that resonates with somebody, when they share it, they sharing it as if it's them saying the same thing because they co-sign it, because they believe in it. So even when we're talking about how portable music is in comparison to reels from a podcast reels are able to skyrocket and scale and resonate with so many more people, because by the time they see it and they agree with it, it doesn't feel like you're asking them for a favor. It doesn't feel like you're giving them something else that you can add to their plate. They share it because the topic that's being discussed in that reel, in that conversation, feels like an extension of how they already feel. If I'm talking about my grandmother having dementia and somebody else is going through that same thing, they're going to share it because they feel it, because they're going through the exact same thing. Again, I am just hypothesizing and theorizing that it is way harder to get two people to agree on one song than it is two people to agree on one conversation of one topic. And the last thing that I want to say about this is, when it's all said and done, I still believe that music is the premium feel. I think music is still the premium feel for a million different reasons. Music is a lot shorter. 3 minutes of a song could change your life. That's all you need. 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. 5 minute songs collected together in a body of work that we call an album. It's classic. It's legendary. And as much as I enjoy podcasts and as much as I love the utility of what a podcast does for a person, it still cannot be compared to music. There are no Marvin Gayes in podcasting. There are no Tupac Shakurs. There are no Bob Marleys. There are no Nas's. There are no Jay-Z's in podcasting, and to a degree, maybe it's foolish and it's trivial to compare the things because in nature, the essence of them are just completely different. I still think that music is the premium feel. It's just something about that 2 minutes, that 3 minutes of I Can't Help It by Michael Jackson, that 3 minutes of What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, that 3 minutes of Bob Marley, that 3 minutes of Tupac, that 3 minutes of Nas, Jay-Z, Common, Mac Miller, Lupe Fiasco, Kendrick Lamar, Fonte and Little Brother, that 3 minutes of Black Thought, that 3 minutes can change your whole life. It can change everything. I mean, I've never heard a podcast that raised every hair on my arms. I've never heard a podcast that embodied so many different episodes that got so many different vibes and feels in it that could just take you from one place to another. I've never experienced that in podcasting. I've never experienced a currency or a jet life in podcasting. There's certain things, as dope as podcasting is, because we already know how dope music is. That's one thing that I want y'all to take away from this conversation. This is not to tear music down, but if anything, it's just to shed some light on podcasting because that's the new chapter that I'm in. That's the new era that I'm in. So I want to show love to podcasting because now podcasting is what I do. That's how I spend the majority of my time. But it goes without saying, bro, like music is music, bro. Come on. Like even after everything that I said about the differences between podcasting and music, at the end of the day, man, music is the premium feel. It'll always be that special thing. Music will always be that My Life in the Sunshine by Roy Ayers. Music will always be The Keys of My Life by Stevie Wonder. That thing that brings peace to your body when you're anxious. That thing that brings happiness to your body when you feel depressed. Music is so powerful. It's the soundtrack to a movie. It's the soundtrack to your life. It's the soundtrack to when you're feeling good, to when you're feeling bad, to when you need to make another friend feel good, so you make a playlist for them. It's the soundtrack to when a DJ mixes a playlist and completely remixes a classic song that you love and gives it a second life. Music is everything. And as much as I'm starting to love podcasting, I will always love music more because it's just the power of music is just undeniable. And with that being said, man, yeah, this is the difference between podcasting and music. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Hope I didn't piss nobody off. On the Halfway Up podcast, we've talked about a lot of things. We talked about love. We talked about God. We talked about relationships. We've talked about spirituality. But one thing that we haven't really had a chance to talk about is music. And I really wanted to do this episode because I recorded it once. I lost the footage. That's a conversation for another day. That'll probably be something I talk about on the 20th episode of the podcast. And, this is something that I really wanted to talk about because as much as I love music, I'm starting to grow a new love for podcasting. And I've always been very scientific and very nerdy when it came to understanding music. Like I'm the type of guy that would open up the CD and read the pamphlet to read the credits. I want to know who the producers are. I want to know who the executive producers are and the A&Rs are. And I want to know everybody who played a role because I understand that to make something happen, you always got to have a team. And I will always love music for that. And I treat podcasting the same way. I'm just as nerdy with podcasting as I was with music. So I just wanted to make this episode. To not put down music, to not try to insinuate that one is better than the other, but instead try to get more people to focus on the benefits of one versus the other. And with that being said, man, I hope you guys enjoy it. If you like it, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know too. I'm not picky about people's opinions. I accept them all equally. And before we get out of here, you already know this is the spirit of the brand. Whenever I'm working, I will remember that done is better than perfect. And if I'm satisfied with my work, then that means that I am living in my purpose. Halfway up, y'all. Peace. Please don't come for me.